Hey guys, it's Julian. Today I'm going to be talking to you about how to make Dimmish style, minimal, deep tech, deep minimal house, whatever you want to call it, deep house. But yeah, we're going to be talking sort of in the style of Planet Zero, its most recent work. This track is doing super well. It's a really unique track as well. That's why I wanted to make this video. It's just because it's a really unique track, and I think we can talk a lot about kind of taking a kind of out there idea, right? Like sampling, using that kind of a melody that has like that more disco, like Michael Jackson sort of feel, but then combining it with the modern dance music and executing it in a way that can be played in clubs now. Because obviously, if you just go and make a disco track, well, you can't really play that amongst a lot of current music. So I think this track is a very good example of how perfect execution can make an idea that's a little bit different work really well. So we're going to be talking about that today. As usual, you can get the full project files, samples, MIDI, presets, everything like that from this video. It's available right on the top of the description for just $5, everything you just heard in the intro. And yeah, this really helps support me, so thank you to everybody who goes to grab it. If you enjoyed these videos, definitely go scoop that, and let's dive in. Alright, so this is the project file. We're at 128 BPM, and the first thing that we have up here is the low end. Now, when you listen to the low end here, obviously, as I say in almost every single one of my videos, the low end of your track is going to be about like 50% of what makes up the track, and what's really going to make it hit. And again, when we go back to talking about like the execution of your idea, I think that's what's really going to help communicate your idea, right? Like, you can have all this cool synth stuff down here. Like, obviously, yeah, you can write that, but if you mess this up, none of that's going to matter. So you really need to put a lot of emphasis on starting with this. And even maybe you start with the synth, but then once you have that, go back and really force yourself to get a good kick and a good bass line going. And when you listen, the bass line isn't even following the chords that much, right? Like, it's really just droning on that one note. It's just A sharp. But we don't need it to. I mean, if you play it with everything else, that's what makes it housey, is having the bass line kind of stay in that one place while the other stuff is moving around. So you need to keep this very simple, and you need to make sure that this is working above all else. So the way that I've made the kick here is just using two layers. We've got this one, which is just for the lows, and then this one, which is just for the mids and highs. And then, yeah, you put those together, you get a very fat kick. And again, like, we're not doing too much oversaturation or overcompression or anything like that. We're just keeping it super clean and simple here, and just getting two solid sounds and putting them side by side. And then for the bass line, so like I said, the notes are very simple. This is all just based on just A sharp. Even here, the higher notes are still just A sharp. And then we have an F there, which you can see we also have an F here. F is just the fifth. So very, very simple musically, but it's more about the groove. And then for the sound, it's also pretty simple. So all this is, we're just using operator, but you can see I don't have any FM happening. And it's just a triangle wave and a saw wave. Just like that. And then they're just going into a low pass filter to kind of make it a bit pluckier. And I really like operator for this. I've tried using analog or wavetable to make these kinds of basses, and for some reason, like, just the way the envelopes are working in operator, like, I don't think it's that operator necessarily sounds different, especially when you're just making a simple sound like this. I think it's more so just like the way you're working in here, and like the way that you shape this envelope. So I really like using operator for these kind of basses, even if it's not doing any FM. And then we just have a compressor, side chaining it to the kick. And then this EQ, which is just cutting out at 100 Hertz, makes a little bit of room for the kick. And then you can see on the group here, we don't have anything. But I still have these grouped together. Why? Well, the reason is because once you get the blend between the kick and bass right, that's kind of like everything is sitting on top of that, right? So by grouping them, now if we go to turn everything up and down in the track, you can see we'll just be touching the overall lowing. And that's really what you want to do. Like, set these, get a really nice blend between these, and then kind of treat it as one thing. And I think the problem is that you see these videos on YouTube where someone's got, like, a bass bus, and then they have, like, the kick over in, like, the drum group. And then I don't know why people are doing that. I don't know how that started. This is how you want to do it. Because this way, again, these are similar elements. Even though one is a drum and one is a bass, they're really both kind of basses, right? To take a page out of James Brown's book. It's very, like, similar ranges. So you really just want to treat those as one thing. You also notice that when we unsolo them, like I was saying, that's like 50% of the mix right there. So then we have our main hi-hat, which is 3 layers. So we combine this one, and then this one. So you can see we're getting like the punch, and then a little bit more punch kind of in a different area of the frequency spectrum, and then just a nice 909 hi-hat with a little bit of a high-end boost as well. And yeah, so, that's pretty self-explanatory, just layering those together to get a fatter sound rather than going and just trying to get one that fits it all. Because you're never just going to find one hi-hat that's like this, especially in sample packs. But that's how big it needs to be to contend with, like, the kick. So you just have to make sure that you layer these. And then I have a live shaker. Nice, kind of brings in some organic stuff to the groove, always good for house. I also have two tambourines and a shaker here. And if you listen, these 3 elements are kind of all dancing around each other. So if you'll notice, like, there's not a whole lot of overlap. But it's kind of like these 2 tambourines, like, it's like call and response between these 2 little elements, and then this little shaker here. And also, I think the shaker really grooves with this one percussion here, too. Or even like this. Like you can hear, so it's not just like in there on random hits, but it's in there in places where it's going to play off of the other stuff that's happening. And this is how you create a groove that's talking to itself. It's not about saturation or compression or EQing. It's about just like good sounds being put in the exact right place. And I guarantee you that if you get that groove down and you get your sounds talking to each other like this, you're not going to be wondering like, what is the magical hi-hat reverb combo that I don't have, because it's not about that. It really isn't. And then after that, we have the rest of the percussion, which is 3 layers. So you can see, like, it's this one that's on the same count every time. If I play that with the hi-hat. Right? Like this first one just... But then we have these 2 kind of call and response. Like, you get this one in one bar, and then you get this one in the second bar. And yeah, so that's creating the groove there. And then you put that on top of those tambourines and the shakers and everything that are like very steadily going. And that's how the groove works. It's not just because it's a lot of different things happening, but it's exactly the way that they're all laid together. And the way, like, again, we put care to have, like, these 2 just be a bar apart and very sparse, contrasting with, like, all the very busy stuff. So, yeah, then underneath that, we have the clap/snare, which sounds like this. So what this is we have this house snare. So just a nice punchy snare that gives like a good to it. But then we also have a 909 clap. And you can hear this is a really nice, crisp 909 clap. So the way I made this one is I actually recorded, you may not be able to see it, but over here, that thing that I just touched, the Roland TR9. Shout out to my friend Bot for letting me borrow that. That's not mine. But anyways, what I did was I've been playing with that thing for the past few days. In particular, like this kind of like method of just taking it and using a mixer actually to make it really fat and crunchy, just by kind of like boosting it and like kind of overdriving the mixer a little bit. So that's what it was. I just took the TR9, played the clap, and then I put it through. Over here I have this Yamaha MG10XU, I want to say, is the name of the model. Very simple mixer. I think I paid like $200 for it, which for a mixer is like not that much. But it's got a great circuit on it to overdrive stuff. So then all it is just the TR9 being pushed through the through the Yamaha mixer and then just straight into here. And that's all it is. And yeah, you can hear it. It's a really crisp and nice sound. So I really like doing this. I'm definitely trying to do a lot more of this in the videos. Just kind of combining hardware and the software to kind of make more like hybrid setup. I think it's more interesting that way. But yeah, you can hear this just gets you like a really nice fat 909 clap. And then you layer that with the snare. And you get a very nice on the beat. And yeah, so then we have the pad. So you can hear I have these very jazzy, funky kind of chords. So if you're not familiar, of course we're talking about that Planet Zero style, which is very much influenced by the track Rock With You by Michael Jackson. And these are very similar chords to Rock With You. So what these are is it's just actually like these pretty, like you see, it's just starting with these basic D sharp minor chords, or minor 9 chords. So you can see like all it is just D sharp minor with a 7th and a 9th on top. Very simple to make that, but it gives you this more jazzy kind of feel. And then over here, see the chord progression is kind of like that. So then it goes to F minor, A sharp major, but then we add in that F there. So like just little stuff like that. And then over here, it goes to G sharp major. And that's like a C sharp major, I want to say. So yeah, it's just kind of like that very like, you know, kind of taking influence from that style of disco from the 70s, especially like the late 70s a little bit. It was very like jazzy and a little bit less like clean, a little bit more soulful. But then it's like I said, kind of like combining that with this, because obviously a lot of times these style of tracks are a lot more of just this. Right, like you take those synths away and it's just a basic, nice, minimal deep house track that's very strong on its own, has a really great groove. So then all you have to do is just introduce something that's a little bit different that you wouldn't usually hear. And it has plenty of space to fit there. But then if you take out all these drums and the bass line, and then you try to just make this with like some random sample pack loop that's not very good, well then these great synths could sound like garbage in that mix. So you really got to keep that in mind, that like, I don't think it's just the synths. I think it's just how well it was executed and how this just being a solid, deep, minimal house groove already kind of is communicating that idea for you. So for the sound on this one, it's made using analog. So what it is it's 2 saw waves, octave apart, going into a low pass filter, which has 2 things modulating it. I have an LFO on there, so that's giving it like a kind of warble. But then we also have an envelope just opening up. And yeah, then we just have a bit of vibrato, a bit of unison. One thing with analog is if you're going to use the unison, you want to turn the voices up to 32. That's just the maximum amount of notes you can play on the keyboard. And the problem is, by default, it's set at like 8. Listen to what this sounds like at 8. And then at 32. So yeah, you got to set that, because otherwise it's not going to let all the notes through. But then I just have some chorus, bit of reverb, a high pass, and then it's just being sidechained to the kick. And then underneath that, we have this like second kind of more of a like a droning pad. So what this is it's just playing A sharp and D sharp actually, which if you listen, it's just two notes that fit really well on top of the chord progression. And then down here, it's going D sharp and G sharp. And that just gives it a little bit of movement. You know, I kind of like the idea of a sound where it's a pad, but then it has something rhythmic to it, because those are on the upbeats. So it's kind of like doing both at the same time. And also, this is just adding a nice movement and kind of like lively element to the background of the track there. So for the sound, this one's made with Operator. This is just an FM sound where you can see we have 4 sine waves, all in different octaves. And the second one's detuned a little bit, so that's giving it a little bit of movement. And then I have an LFO on the filter cutoff, as well as the volume of oscillator B. So it's kind of like modulating the FM amount, basically. And then we just have a bit of chorus, a bit of echo and reverb to give it some space. And then it's just being sidechained to the kick. And then the last layer down here is the lead. So yeah, to write this kind of a lead, basically, you can write this, it's not actually going to be that hard, but I think you need to be very careful of not using too many notes. Now, you notice there's a lot of notes being repeated here. There's a lot of like, dun dun dun, like that kind of thing, or like, just reusing notes a lot. This might seem like a crazy, all over the place lead, and it is a little bit, but the thing that makes that work, and the reason why, again, it's all about not just having the idea, but executing it, is essentially because even though it's a lot of notes, it's a lot of the same note. So you kind of have to pick, like, if you think about it as, like, 2 different factors, essentially, right? Like, you can have the factor of a lot of different notes, and then you have the factor of a lot of notes happening in succession. Well, if you try to do both of those as crazy as you can, it's just going to be a mess. If you try to say, okay, one of these is going to be very simple. Say, like, we're going to use very few notes. Well, then you can go crazy over here. Or maybe you say, well, it's going to not be that many notes playing after each other, but we could have a lot of different notes in the scale. Like, it's just kind of like, yeah, it's a very abstract way of thinking. But I think that if you think about it that way, ultimately, you're going to be able to decode this. Because it's not that hard. You pick a scale, and then you just write this kind of nice pattern with it. But yeah, you just have to know how to not mess it up, really. And the other thing here is the rhythmic way that this is kind of fitting into the track, too. The way it's like, if you just put this in all quarter notes or all eighth notes, it's going to be kind of messy. But if you make it really bouncy, especially like once we get over here, you have to be able to make that fit with the actual rhythm of the track. So it's not just melodic, it's also rhythmic, but it's just like kind of putting it all together in one place. And then for the sound here, so it's 2 layers. We have an operator patch. And all this is you can see, it's just 2 sine waves, one's an octave up and detuned a little bit. And then just a bit of chorus. And then we have this glide. You can see I have the voices on 1, and then it's gliding. So that's how we're getting the way the notes like slide to and from each other. That's what does that. And then the next layer is this pan flute. Just kind of brings something a little bit more organic into it. And so this is just a sample. I've got a little bit of a high pass on that. And then I've got, you notice the glide? We put it at the same time. And this is part of why I love using 2 layers that are both in the Ableton kind of like stock things. Because you can just set the glides at the same time, and it'll be the same. Versus like, some VSTs you might have an issue with that if you had like, say, 2 different VSTs doing this. But yeah, you can hear when we put those together, it just kind of makes one very full sound. And then we just have a bit of reverb and a compressor sidechaining into the kick, And that's really all you need to make this lead work. And I think this lead, this should work whether you have a cool sound or not. You need to write good notes. Like, you can't just write kind of an okay pattern and then get the cool pan flute and, have the perfect sample and all that stuff. It's not going to work. You need to have really good notes, because even when I was writing this with like a sine wave, that's how I wrote this. It was just a sine wave. I wrote the melody and then I made the sound. And it's like, you're just not going to get it if you're just too focused on the sound. You need to kind of shape it around making those notes speak for themselves regardless of what sound is being played. And yeah, so as you can see, it's not actually that hard if you know what you're doing with the minimal deep stuff to make a track like this. I think it's just a matter of executing a different idea really, really well, and just always being very understanding of the idea that, like, this needs to sit on top of a solid groove or else it's not going to work. Like, this needs to have that solid execution before anything, and then we can add the cool synths rather than just thinking about the cool synths. And yeah, so that was going to be it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed. As always, make sure to like this video as well as subscribe, and let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Like I said in the beginning, you can get this full project file, samples, MIDI, presets. Literally every single thing that you saw in this video is available at the top of the description for just $5 on my Bandcamp. This really helps support me, so definitely go grab it if you like this video and you want to see more. And yeah, thank you so much, everybody, and I'll see you tomorrow with another video.